Jahangir Aziz, head of EM Asia Economic Research at JP Morgan, joins in with his take on the Fed's decision. They've always had like a first mover advantage. Do you think that this would take the world as well in pause mode, not swing completely into an accommodative stance, but really scale back from being hawkish?
No, that's a fair assessment. I think, if you look at the way in which central banks across the globe react, I think, they always react to their domestic conditions, domestic inflation, domestic, growth. But a large part of the reaction, particularly among emerging market countries, is reacting to what the Fed does. And some of the countries, particularly the current account deficit countries, move lock and step with the Fed. Others move slightly behind the Fed. But the Fed has a very, very large influence on central bank monetary policy across the globe. And this pause, which most likely now looks for quite some time, will give them the breathing space that wasn't there, starting from the second quarter of 2018 till about, the fourth quarter of 2018.
Right.
Jahangir, inflation is under control. U.S. unemployment data is at an all-time low. Some would argue that this is the best time that Fed could actually normalize their balance sheet, because when U.S. economy start slowing down in the second half of this year because of the base effect, that may not be a right time to really, increase rates. So don't you think U.S. Fed should use this Goldilocks scenario to their advantage to actually, increase rates?
Look, I mean, there are two sets of issues over here. One is the balance sheet, the other is the rate. And despite the fact that, many of us, would talk a lot about, QE and QT, taking away the quantity easing and what impact it has, I think as far as monetary policy operations is concerned, there is nothing really sacrosanct about the size of the balance sheet. The fact that the U.S. Fed has a very large balance sheet now, and so does the ECB, so does BOJ, it's news only because these are central banks that didn't have or didn't use quantitative easing or quantitative part of monetary or tools of monetary policy. Look around emerging markets. Emerging markets have been using quantitative tools, for forever, and large central banks even today use quantitative tools. I mean, India does that. People's Bank of China does that. Almost all almost all the emerging market countries use it, and many of these emerging market central banks have very large balance sheets. So having a very large balance sheet and trying to quote unquote normalize that is something that's debatable. Normalizing rates, that's a completely different ballgame altogether. And there is nothing that says that, let's say, as you pointed out, in a scenario in which U.S. goes into a recession, not now, but, let's say a year and a half from now, they can't expand the balance sheet even further. So I'm not too worried about the balance sheet normalization part of it. What is much more worrisome is the part of the Fed policy about, the patience with which it will look at the next rate adjustment, the lack of guidance, forward-looking guidance, which has been a core part of Fed's policy, and the fact that, we do not have any sense from the Fed about where they see the balance of risks on growth any longer.
Jahangir, I know I'm going to go outside the purview of the Fed, but tomorrow is also an important day, or maybe not. We'll have a budget announcement as well coming in from Piyush Goyal this time. Populist as it may be, what are a couple of key announcements that you're expecting tomorrow?
Look, I mean, unlike what the market is fearing, my sense is that they will announce an outturn for the current fiscal year, which is very close to 3.3, maybe it's 3.4. They might include a large amount of spending on some form of universal basic income or some sort of transfers to, to the farming community. Not exactly sure what they're thinking at this point in time. But the overall budget number for next year will be my guess on a consolidation mode. the way in which we look at India's central government budget is completely from an accounting sense, and from an accounting sense, it does, the space that the government has of pushing spending or borrowing across from public sector, etc., pushing expenditures into the state government, has sort of made this idea that we should look at central government budget versus state government budget versus public sector borrowing it's almost meaningless. I think what we need to look for is what is the total size of public sector borrowing last year or the year before that. We need to look at what does this imply for total public sector borrowing for this year. These numbers are very, very large. And so I'm not so this thing that, we will get any meaningful sense of what the public sector borrowing will be for the coming fiscal year from what the accounting number that will come out in tomorrow's budget.
Appreciate the time. These are we asked for you, so really appreciate that you accommodated this interview.